Hello, Linton Herbert here in my Old Testament prophet garb, and we'll be trying to be prophetical, not predicting the future magically, just looking at some things that are important. Um, I suppose you are um, familiar with this. Let me go over it again. If you want to get to the references or see what I'm saying written out, get on the internet, go to nobabies.net. Um, when you go there, you'll get this this picture. You can study it. This is how to get a hold of me. Info at nobabies.net. Be patient. Nobody ever asks me any questions, and so I don't check it very often. Then there's these links, source code, and so forth. If you go to YouTube links, you can get all my movies. The 32 first ones are the important ones, the prophecies. We're on about prophecy, about movie 50 now, prophecy 5 or something. You can look for a wild surmise. The scripts are there if you want it written out. And here we go, prophecy, movie 50, prophecy 5, and it's about war, which is a totally unmanageable subject, so we'll just spend a few minutes talking about it. There's movies 2001 Space Odyssey. When I saw it, there was a moment when you could, a friend was with me at the time, they're going to Jupiter on a spaceship, and my friend leans over and whispers, "You wouldn't be passing stars on the way to Jupiter. You see the stars going back by in the background." All right, it's a movie. But at one point, something looks kind of like an ape or human, or a human wearing an ape costume. Bunch of them bash the another band over the head, and that one they got right. Apparently, if you were to collect, I've read this. I don't have a reference for you. If you were to collect all the bones of everything more closely related to us than chimpanzees, but not modern humans, and even including a bunch of really old modern humans, throw them all in the back of a pickup truck, because that's all they work with. Of course, there are gaps in the fossil record and ambiguities, and people fight over every finger bone like it's now we at last we understand everything, and they don't. It's totally, it's amazing we have anything at all, given them periods of time, how little we have. Well, if you went through that pickup truck and pulled out the skulls and looked at them, most of them had skull fractures. So yeah, we've been bashing each other over the head since long before there were modern humans. Chimpanzees are no better. A group of chimpanzees will get along fine, and then the day comes when they begin to squabble, and half of them will leave, and one group, usually the group that had remained, will hunt down the others and kill them off one by one. Warfare, chimpanzees do it. You can't even define humans as the beast that fights wars, because we're not alone in that, although not many other than humans and chimps, and not all chimps. The four more horsemen of the apocalypse, we go to New Testament scripture. Of the four horsemen, three of them were warring one fashion or other. The other is food prices. Okay. Old Testament, here is what the book of Joshua has. Chapter 6, starting verse 21. And they, meaning the Israelites, utterly destroyed all that was in the city, that was Jericho, both man and woman, young and old, an ox and sheep and ass, with the edge of the sword. That is hideous beyond imagination. And you know what, to me, one of the real shockers of it is? that it just moves blithely on from killing people to killing animals as if there's no difference. Oh yeah, by the way, when they killed the horses and the sheep. Later on down in here, if you if you go down far enough, you'll find that um, as they conquered Canaan, the Holy Land or the Promised Land, um, they would kill everybody and the animals, but they would keep the gold and silver. I think that's probably backstory. I probably kept a lot of stuff. Um, and Joshua spares one person. There's a woman who was named Rahab. Um, she was a harlot. Oh dear! And she lived in the city wall. And she was the only one in the city who arguably did deserve to be punished because she's the one that ratted out the city. And all she had to do was tell the spies, there's nobody here younger than about 50. You come over here with a few hundred young men and you can kill everybody. We are hopeless. We are all ancient. And she lowered them over the wall with a purple rope. Purple means royalty. And so here's this harlot who has a rope with the king's name on it, so to speak. So the king and she were presumably up to something unwholesome. Um, and if you look around, you'll find people saying, oh, well, it was, yes, it seems shocking, it seems harsh, but all those people in Canaan were sinners, so they deserved to die. So killing them all wasn't a bad thing to do. Yeah, right. I'm sorry. No, it was a bad thing to do. Now, in the backstory, and I think the purple rope is so persuasive and so specific that it counts as story. The marching around Jericho and giving out a great shout and the walls fell down, that's backstory. Everybody knew Jericho had walls. It was probably the first city ever to have a wall, right? So how did the children of Israel get over the wall? Well, the wall must have fallen down, so they invented the whole walls come tumbling down thing to account for the story, which they had reason to believe, which was, yeah, they went in there and just a handful of them just slaughtered everybody in town. All right, false. The one reason to suspect that the walls all fell down, well, there are two reasons. One is Rahab's still alive. She's living in a house in the wall. All right, she wasn't killed when the wall fell down, so that doesn't click. Plus, much of the wall still stands. So, okay, backstory. Um, all right. Um, so, let me give this to you straight, all right? Any way you define war, and it's easy to define because it's so regularly done by people, it's a sin. It is destructive behavior. And people who encourage fighting wars are encouraging you to, they are sinning. Now, if a kid gets drafted and is sent off to the military and does his job, that's not a sin. The soldier isn't the one sinning. The guy who called for the war is sinning. Uh, um, yeah, I don't believe all the horrors of the Old Testament are good. I think war is the greatest sin. I can analyze it and look at it and talk about it with a straight face, and I can't do the same with Rotherham. I don't know. But Even in that unhappy town, the events there are not as evil as war, not as great a sin. I'm sorry, war's a sin. Somebody had to tell you, even if I had to come back thousands of years for another reincarnation and put on my old linen rag and lean on my stick. And of course, this is a modern piece of sentiment. It would be a stick here with a, it's upside down. You got a branch, and you can use it to, well, you can use it to whack folks. You can use it to hook ankles. You can use it to help your sheep. Um, or you can poke them with it. So you got a nice point up front. Um, it's a very versatile tool, weapon. All right. So I'm telling you, war is a sin. Inciting war is a sin. The worst there is. All right. So we say, okay, we dismiss all of the scripture. Fine, have at it. We'll go to real history. First history was written by a man named Herodotus. And it was about a war with Iran. Oh me. Second real history was written by a man named Thucydides. It was about a war between Athens and Sparta. So history basically is the history of warfare. Roman history is saturated with war. Dark Ages, same. Middle Ages, same. The rationale they'd come up with in Rome was that, oh, somebody broke a treaty, so we have to defeat them and enslave them. By the Middle Ages, the working rationale was there was glory in it, and the landed super rich would do it for sport. First American War of Secession wasn't really a revolution. Nobody wanted to try to overthrow the government, which was in England. It did seem to accomplish something. It established the first powerful republic. Oh yeah, there were problems. There was slavery in some of the states, not all. There had been witch trials, and although a new principle of law, which was that evidence couldn't be spectral, you couldn't you couldn't scream that witch is torturing me. You had to have evidence. You had to see something. Somebody had to do something for it to be admitted as evidence. Basically, what happens is they charged the governor's wife with witchcraft, and as you probably know, there's more than one set of rules out there, and the super rich, like the governor's wife, live under one set of rules, and us poor devils digging in the dirt with our fingernails, and we live by another set of rules. So we can be taken up and murdered on a trumped up charge of witchcraft, but you can't do that to the super rich. Right. Amazing how nothing changes. Now, we had a republic, a world-class power. Not quite yet the superpower, but it was a world-class power, invincible, and a republic. All we had to do to stop having wars was for people to say, we don't want it. Stop those horrible wars. And anyone who's recommended when you say, you are sinning, you are a tool of Satan, I don't care whether you do rituals or not, effectively it's Satan. Effectively you are demanding that evil be done. And basically you're worshiping Satan. If you're pushing war, look at anybody who says, oh, let's have a war. Sorry, at that moment and probably the rest of the time when you're not looking, that person is worshiping Satan. You don't believe Satan exists? Fine, neither do I. But when somebody worships something, you know, idolaters will worship a stick or a stone. Fine. They know that there's nothing remarkable about the stick or the stone. It's the truth behind the stick or stone that they are worshiping, and in that they believe. If somebody's worshiping something, in this case Satan, then that person believes in Satan. I don't, they do. War is really bad, and pushing it is a hideous sin. Um, okay, so we started a republic and had the opportunity to have peace. And what did we do? Well, we were already having wars with the Indians. You know, remember Squanto? That whole thing about the Pilgrims was done in the context of a war among the Indians themselves. If you feel that I'm referring to improperly, you put whatever word in you like. My impression is that the natives of this great land don't mind being called Indians. It's something else that drives people to scream about it. Anyway, so they were fighting Indians, and that went on until a peace treaty was signed between the United States government and the last of the renegades, the Florida Seminole Indians. Signed a peace treaty with Harry Truman after the bomb had been dropped and Japan had been defeated. All right? We have always been at war. Well, at least from then to then. And then I'm skipping over stuff like grabbing some land from Mexico, which was not proper. The really big one after the first American War of Secession, or Revolution, this was the Second American War of Secession. Okay, there was a good spin-off from that. We stopped having slaves, and slavery is sin for the slave owner, and the slave is no more sinning than a soldier. But the owner, yeah, it's a sin. It's evil. Um, Not as bad as war, of course. A whole notion of a war to free the slaves. That's a devil's bargain. Oh, so to stop a really horrible evil, we actually managed to find an even worse evil. Okay. South had every right to secede. The Constitution was written down on paper. People could read it. It says, whatever we didn't mention is the right of the states and of the people, and the word secession never appears. That means literally you got the right to leave. That's the Constitution. But Lincoln had a bunch of soldiers under him, and so he decided that he was going to start a war. There are people who think rather well of Mr. Lincoln to this day, despite his having been the reason of the absolutely pointless slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people. All you had to do was say, let's have a vote on this slavery thing and let's get together. Or secede, you guys work it out. All right. At one point, Lincoln suspended the habeas corpus. You look it up. Basically, it means rule of law. He established the first death camp, a place called Camp Douglas. Yeah, it was a death camp. Yeah, it was worse than death camps have been since. I don't think anyone has ever sunk as low as Camp Douglas. Look it up. And under Mr. Lincoln's leadership, if a black man was captured with a bunch of Confederates, the black man was shot dead on sight. Well, that's kind of racist, isn't it? And so, yeah, that's right. Funny thing about sin, once you get started, it's kind of hard to stop. And Mr. Lincoln was just caught in a death spiral on that. But he got himself murdered and then became a martyr, and the people who became the super rich worshipped him and forced the rest of us to. There are people who say we didn't have to get into World War One. We did. My mother said we didn't have to get into World War II. Let you judge that one. I think we kind of got attacked at Pearl Harbor. She said we goaded the Japanese into it. The Japanese were goading a whole lot of people. They were already fighting wars in the Pacific. The Korean War seemed to be a legitimate concern about the Russian communism going to take over the world and snuff out freedom. Um, well, they didn't. I'm sure those who will say society dies from within, that the academics were supporting communism even during the height of Stalin's murders. And of course, Stalin killed a lot more people than the Germans, Nazis did. But, call somebody a Nazi and it's considered like actionable. Destroy a person, that, call them a communist, and people say, well, you're being a little sick, really socialist. Really. And yet, the numbers are quite clear. Slaughter under Stalin was greater than slaughter in the German regime. But our intellectuals were all supporting the communists. Yeah, that was going on. Sorry. I went to a liberal college. Remember getting my back up and refusing to have my beliefs changed. I said, I didn't come here to have my brain rewired. I came here to learn enough to go on with education and find out what's going on in the world, okay? I did not come here to be changed into a political animal of a different stripe. I remember thinking that, and the fight left me very unhappy. But unfortunately, I did not make a record of exactly how they were doing it. I didn't know. I still don't know. But they put pressure on me. Survived. Flourished. Academically did great. All right. Even as societies die from within, we have all the confidence in the world we can change them by war. Yeah, free college education for everybody. I wouldn't put everybody through what I went through in college. Okay, you can smell the stench of politicians. Vietnam War was based on a lie. It was about the Gulf of Tonkin. World War One was Gulf War One started by inviting Hussein to invade what are the countries south of them, and then we passed word around that Iraqi soldiers were throwing babies out of incubators and let them die on the floor. It's a total lie, but it served its purpose. Got us into the Gulf War One, Gulf War Two, based on weapons of mass destruction. Never existed. I never believed in it. Somebody out there was pushing these wars because we got into them on the basis of lies. Look at how many nations we've subverted around the world. I'm going to skip over Caribbean and South America, wars we started there. Don't get me started on what Africans do to each other. The rationale tends to be resources or petrodollar or profit for the mega corporations, but there have been so many rationales. Yeah, someone was telling me that, oh, all wars are fought over resources. Right. Explain the Crusades. Not enough deserts in Europe. Well, that many different rationales, and the wars are always the same. I don't believe in any of them. There's something that drives us into war. Um, it's costly, murderous, sinful, hideous, pointless, and deadly. All we have to do to stop is elect officials who don't want to do it. But rather than to try to sort out the cause just now, let's look at the effect of war, the real effect where it matters, which is infertility, which concerns fertility. And we could go back and think about a cause. Okay. Right. Some robot calling me. Um, you need to know this. If you don't, go to that link and read the first 32 scripts, and you will know it. Proved 4 ways fertility depends on kinship between a couple and among their ancestors, and it depends on nothing else, all capitals. I'm screaming it, all right? We'll take a simple example. Conrad's Heart of Darkness should be underlined. In the story, a boat's making its way down, or the narrator is describing the boat making its way down a river in the African jungle. There are problems. One thing the narrator didn't worry about is his crew deserting. Native crew. They're not going to do that. They know perfectly well if they do, they will be found as homeless wanderers and immediately killed. All right? Yeah, that was in the 20th century, I guess. It's still true today. In that environment, you don't leave your village. So the mating pool is restricted. You wander out of town, the first person to see you call his friends, they'll kill you, right? And that maintains their fertility. Maybe it's instinct, I hope not. It might be just a random behavior that some societies employ, and those that do survive, the rest die out. I hope it's not instinct, but people can learn. All right, ancient custom is to shun outsiders. That works something like 10 generations out. Past 10 generations, kinship means nothing. All that racism stuff, ethnocentrism, doesn't matter at all. Nature only tracks out for 10 generations, and then it says total stranger. You could have a choice between a 10th cousin and a 1,000th cousin, and nature would not take that into account when defining your fertility. All right, but it's terribly important for those first 10 generations. So, given a little bit of an edge from nature to, say, cling to family, humans figure, say, well, if a little is important, a lot must be more important. You know, if that person is separated from me for 300 years, about 300 years, and that matters, well, there's one been separated about 30,000 years. That obviously must matter a lot more. No, it doesn't, but that's what they're responding to an instinct that's gone wild. It's gone crazy. It's become malignant. Okay. So we get our wars and our racism and our laws. Not only do wars cause obvious harm, they're an occasion for the young men, and it's mostly men, to go out, find the enemy, where they meet women, and where's my cursor? It there, okay. And they marry outside the family circle. This time, instead of bang, killed one person, it's, oh, honeypot, you married and it kills people for generation after generation. worse than battle deaths, worse than the innocent civilians, worse than the terrible emotional burden of having tried to kill other human beings. It's an aspect of war that nobody realizes, but it's about the worst. All right, there are a few voices in politics willing to change the war-minded consensus, fewer in the corporate media. There are a few in the independent media, YouTube, like this. I particularly like Jimmy Dore, Last American Vagabond, and Steve Molyneux and Florida Marquis. They tend to be pacifists. They tend to be against war. I don't agree with everything they say, of course. No two people agree on everything. They speak out against war. It's gratifying to have their voices, both for the sake of those who hear it and for the sake of the hint that we're not totally at the mercy of some horrible instinct. All right, I would be happier if people generally realize that war is a sin. Anybody who promotes a war is sinning and effectively is a tool of Satan. He may not think he believes in Satan, but I think he believes in Satan because he's going through the act of worshiping Satan. And that, to me, is the definition of a religion. And I can look at something somebody else is worshiping and I say, there's nothing there. I can do that. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can worship anything without believing in it. And those who start wars, those who propose wars, those who push wars, they are sinning, they are worshiping Satan. And I think you really don't want to hook up your wagon to them. All right, take care.